Maybe there's some group out there that analyzes electronic equipment and helps me buy things.
Consumer reports.
Yeah, something like that. And good housekeeping seal of approval. We would have a lot more of those if people wouldn't become dependent on government. They became dependent on government to protect us from those who might invade our airplanes, and the Guard is let down. So if we didn't depend on the government to take care of us, we would have more consumer protection. In the ideal society, we'd have Ralph Nader working in the private sector and really helping us to protect the consumer. But he wouldn't be engaged in just promoting big government. See, but his intent would be similar.
So again, and I mean this seriously, this is wonderful education for me. Right to bear arms must be supportive
Absolutely.
of. Any restrictions on that? Submachine guns?
Yeah.
Nuclear weapons?
Well, I think if there's a clear intent of blowing up a country and somebody knows about it, you know, that clear and present danger, you would be able to argue some restraint on that. But whether it's an automatic weapon or not is, I think, irrelevant. I think the gun laws today punish the minorities in the inner city because they can't defend themselves. Rich white people and people live in the suburbs, they seem to have their guns and protect themselves. So no, we need people to be allowed to protect themselves. I think the Second Amendment would have prevented 9/11. They might not even tried it if they knew every pilot had a gun, you know, and the responsibility should have been on the pilots and the airlines, not on the government telling us that you can't have a gun and you can't resist. So we set the stage. Oh, you're thinking about blowing up a few places.
So again, not just the pilots, but the airlines can let people, you know, you're welcome to bring a gun onto the plane.
The airlines have the total responsibility, just like you would here at Google. You would decide if gun ownership was permitted by the state. And you didn't want any guns on here, you have a right. You have a right to bring your own laws and say there's no guns on Google property. So that'd be fine with me.
I think we probably would do that.
That'd be good.
Yeah. So again, I'm sensitive to time, but it's fascinating to me. So let's keep on going around. So contract with, you know, IRS, hand went way up there. Thought it was going to go into the studio upstairs. Violating a contract? Why so? Aren't there functions that governments should perform that require people to contribute to the cost?
Contribute, yeah. If they want to voluntarily contribute, that'd be okay.
National defense, a voluntary checkoff?
You would, but you probably need to spend about 1/3 of what we're spending on the military. That's military-industrial complex. It's not defense spending.
So again, so it's not the theory of the IRS or the country. It's the idea
no,
of
it's
how
a theory. The theory of the IRS is rather repugnant to me because the assumption is made that the government owns 100% of your income, and I permit you to keep 5%, 10%, or 20%. You're vulnerable. You've sold out because the government can take 80% if they want, which they did at one time. So no, I want the money to be held in the hands of people. See, I want a few young people to be energetic and come up with new ideas and go out and start new businesses. For all we know, you know, so that's what we want.
Again, in the Paul administration, how would we raise money for national defense, even if it's a small sum?
Well, we could look back and see how we did it before 1913.
And that was?
It was by a uniform tariff, but not protected tariffs. And you could have some type of excise taxes. But the big thing...
So not income taxes?
No income taxes,
Gotcha.
because that's an assumption that the government owns your life, just as a military draft and selective service assumes that the government owns people's lives, and they keep it on the books because if things get out of hand like they might with Iran, they could have a lot of people to call on, men and women now. So I don't want any assumption that government owns our life, because then they can own our liberties and they can own our property. And unfortunately, we're moving in that direction. I want to go in the other direction.
Any example of a country other than the United States that you feel does a better job protecting liberties or maintaining a smaller government?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's more and more now starting to encroach upon our reputation for protecting liberties. I would think, you know, the kind of government they have in Switzerland is probably not all that bad. I think it'd be pretty neat to be president of Switzerland. Nobody you
heard it here first, everyone.
Nobody even knows who the president of Switzerland is. Right. So that's what we need. We don't have to have this dictator type person running the world. I want to be president, not because I want to run your lives. I don't want to be president to run your economy, and I don't want to be president to run the world. I want to be president to restore liberty. I want a government that protects your privacy and exposes government secrecy. It's reverse of what we're getting, and this idea is spreading like wildfire, and people love it. And they know that we need to change because they know what we're doing is going to bankrupt this country. We don't have a good national defense now, and nobody seems to have a way out. And we can get out in a very conservative, constitutional way of just saying we're protecting liberty, we're protecting the rule of law, we're protecting the American traditions, the Constitution. And it's, to me, very appealing, and it's very appealing to a lot of others.
So one of the concepts that you hear a lot of candidates talking about, certainly on the Democratic side, is this concept of a social safety net. It doesn't sound like the concept of a social safety net is compatible with this idea of limited government.
Yeah, but think of it this way. What if I came over here and you have a lot of employees, and let's say that I worry about your company and I want to have a social safety net for your employees. Well, it's the environment that provides your prosperity, and I'll bet people don't worry about a safety net when you work for a good company, because there's more wealth, there's more generosity, more health benefits, and people are better off. So you want the safety net to be provided by strong companies.
Suppose people don't have a job.
Well, there would be a lot more jobs under my society. There would be very, very few people that would be out of work. Because there would be greater incentives, there wouldn't be a welfare state, and so the poverty would be greatly reduced. But then again, we have to look toward the 19th century and the early 20th century, how many people were out in the I mean, we have never, in a capitalistic society, ever have seen people starving. It's only under socialism and welfarism where government takes charge of this, taking charge of making sure that they have education and medical care and housing. And that's why today we're seeing the collapse of the housing bubble. Who's losing their houses? The poor people who can't meet the requirements of making their payments. So the government was well intended to give houses to everybody, but all of a sudden the people on the margin are losing their houses. So yes, if you really care about people and you really care about a humanitarian approach to government, you have to believe in free markets. It's capitalism that eliminated child labor, eliminated poverty. You do not have famines in true capitalism. You will have poor people. You're going to have people that won't have medical care.
Right. But, I was just going to ask about medical care. Aren't there some...
Today, if you're a burn victim, probably any part of the country, but especially in Texas, you can go to the Shriner Hospital in Galveston. And nobody gets turned away. I started medicine in the early 60s. No government. I worked for $3 an hour as an MD in an emergency room. Nobody got turned away. It was a church hospital. Nobody asked them what your income was. And today, everybody gets charged a maximum because there are no charity hospitals anymore, and the government's there. So and they have a lot of burdens. There's extra expenses and demands that aren't legitimate, and so therefore they have to charge the maximum. If they're not on Medicaid, they put them on Medicaid. So it's a bad system.
Did the market create the charity hospitals?
Sure, freedom does. Freedom does. Who created our great universities early on? Not the government. Our churches did, and other private institutions. So, and we undermined all that. That's what we've been doing for 100 years. We've been systematically undermining a system that was a real blessing to us, that gave us our great prosperity. Today, we still have a lot of prosperity, but we have a lot of debt, and it's based on debt. It's the fact that this country can't even operate. Congress could be brought to its knees, which means the dollar and the country could be brought to its knees if we couldn't depend on the Japanese and the Chinese loaning us money at a good rate. So as long as they're doing that, we're going to have this pseudo-prosperity, but it will come to an end. As a matter of fact, we're in the early stages of seeing that happen because we see the dollar weakening dramatically right now. I mean, we're hitting 30-year lows with the pound and historic lows for the euro, and they're not very good currencies. So the only true test is what will your dollar buy. And quite frankly, if you're on the margin, if you're low income or poor, your inflation tax, your lower standard of living is much more serious than those in the middle class, high income people, because inflation is no big deal. But if you care about the middle class and you care about the problems you ask about, you have to talk about sound money. You have to talk about making sure governments can't pretend that they can deliver you all these wonderful things if they don't have enough money. They can't tax us anymore because there may be a tax revolt. They can't borrow anymore. Maybe the Chinese won't do it. They just print the money. I mean, it's the most foolish economic issue I've ever heard of, and nobody asks any questions about it. about it. And then they say, oh yes, the price of medicine is going up. It must be those terrible doctors. It must be the hospitals. They're the ones who are at fault. But what happens in the marketplace where there's electronic technology? Prices go down. And the modern age should have driven the price of medicine down. Telemedicine and these things are very helpful and all, but it's one area where prices don't go down, they go up. What about education? The government's involved in education, prices go up. That's the result of the inflating of the money supply. The supply goes up, the value goes down, it has to go somewhere, it has to hurt somebody. The tragedy of this is it hurts poor people. And it wipes out eventually the middle class, and that's why you've had these turmoils in many nations, and we're not immune from it. Everybody will be affected if you have runaway inflation. Just think of what happened in Germany, with runaway inflation. And people should be much more concerned about the integrity of the money. And to me, it's an economic issue, it's a moral issue, but it's also the reason government can grow in a sneaky way.
So, and that's right. Again, did I read correctly? You're a gold standard guy.
Well, yes, in a way I am, but I
so that our currency and the growth of our currency should be linked to the availability of gold and reserves.
I'm hard assets. And under the Constitution, you're for gold and under the Constitution, you should be gold or silver because that's still the law of the land. But I'm for assets, hard assets, rather than the opposition is easier to state and understand. I'm against this silly notion that you should trust the politician to print the money when he needs it and think the money is going to maintain its value. That's the ridiculous notion. Instead, I do get a lot of fun made of me. Oh, yeah, he's the guy who wants to go back to the gold standard. I don't want to go back to the gold standard. There's a better gold standard.
It's hard value.
But the value, there were some shortcomings of the 19th century gold standard. But if you look at 125 years of history, the price levels, in time of war, when they inflated, it went up. But price levels stayed like this. Since 1971, since we have separated our dollar from gold, prices have done this, and the size of government has done this, and our liberties have done this. So that's why money is very, very important, because it can be so devastating to the entire economy. And no matter who you are or where you are, you have to think of the monetary unit is 1/2 of every single transaction you make. That's your measuring rod. And it's sort of like if you're an architect and they took away the ruler and the yardstick, and you couldn't measure anything anymore. And this is the measurement of value. And it's arbitrary, and it makes no sense.
So last set of questions from me before we open it up to people and I start reading some of the questions we have. Environmental issues, global warming, climate change, seems like something that indeed hasn't been an issue that's been well addressed by market forces to date. Seems like a perfect example of a so-called market failure, that the external costs of pollution don't get absorbed by companies, and thus a natural place where some sort of collective action, government intervention might be appropriate.
Well, I see that the failure is more government than the market, because I think it was a lack of a true market and a true principle of private property. Your property looks pretty nice here, and it wasn't because of the government. And if you were instructed to have a business like this in the Soviet Union, I'll bet you your grounds wouldn't look so beautiful. And because it would be government in charge. So when the government gets in charge, they make mistakes. We don't have enough respect for private property is the main thing. In the Industrial Revolution, I was raised in the city of Pittsburgh, and believe me, I know something about pollution. And nobody respected private property rights. Anybody could pollute anybody's air. They polluted the rivers. The government dumped the sewers in the rivers. It was horrible. But that whole city was cleaned up without the EPA. It was cleaned up, by local and private sources. But
these are global issues to some extent.
Well, before we can go to global, what we can do is emphasize the fact that you as an individual have no right, although we can argue you will take good care of the property here,